Alright, so I'm back, and as you can see, I've done a little bit of work with taking off that excess heat compound. Nothing too difficult. You basically just rub the surface with the paper towel to get most of it off there. Use a different piece over here and there. And then to kind of finish it off and give it a little bit better polish, you need a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. Where'd my screwdriver go so I can pop a hole in this damn thing? Just get a little bit on your paper towel like so. And you'll be taking that and just give it a good little rub. That'll help to kind of dissolve some of the like that built up heat sink compound that's on there. Nothing too major, but you want to get it as clean and free of the excess thermal paste as possible. So just a matter of getting as much off as you can. And you can use a little bit more alcohol when you need to. But you really want to make sure that your water block is nice and clean and smooth and as close to a mirror finish as possible. This being a pre-made copper one, they don't really put these. They don't really get these the same specification that the other ones are. So if you were really into that kind of thing, machining, you could lap it yourself and get it to be a bit smoother. The smoother it is, and the less roughness there is to it, the better it's going to perform in terms of heat dissipation and being able to actually attach to the processor more cleanly. So now that I've got that out of the way, pretty much the only thing left to do is to install the new motherboard, new processor, and attach the cables again. So, move everything out of the way and grab the new motherboard and new processor. Now, I prefer to connect the processor prior to plugging in the motherboard. So, what I'll be doing here, because prior to connecting the motherboard, I prefer to plug in the processor, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm actually going to plug it in after the fact. Now, another thing to note is if you're doing this from scratch, a lot of the time your case will have markings. So when you're putting in, you have to put in these little risers for the motherboard yourself. A lot of the time they'll actually say on there, like these ones say ATX, EATX, all that kind of stuff, and you want to make sure you put them in the right spots, because all motherboards for the most part have the same scheme as far as ATX or MATX or extended ATX, however, whatever kind of board you have. So that being said, I'm going to slide this guy in. Oh, one thing I probably should be doing first is popping this out. So you got to make sure you put in the new back plate before you go ahead and try to plug your motherboard in. Otherwise, it's not going to fit in there just right. So I'm going to do that real quick. Well, if you remember this from the unboxing video, here's our back plate connector. Just pretty much you just push in the back. You go from the inside for the most part, usually, and you just line it up, and you just kind of gotta push it in there until you get a lot of clicking and popping, and then you'll know that it's in there. Sometimes they can be a pain. Alright. So, still not in there. There we go. That's getting in there now. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's in there good and tight now. Alright, so that being done, we can now complete setting the motherboard into its proper spot. It goes. And it'll pretty much slide right in once you have that back connector in there. And from here, It's just a matter of putting screws all back in there. So this is going to be a little bit more tricky due to the thermal armor kind of being in the way. Like that. So drop a screw and take the whole damn thing out, so don't want to do that. Better get some tweezers. Alright. Again, keep in contact with the power supply and any other exposed piece of metal that I can, just to ensure that I don't inadvertently shock anything. Also good to use the right size screwdriver for the type of screws that you're trying to put in. That way you won't strip the screws. You also want to be attentive to anything that was under your motherboard, because you don't want to leave a short somewhere. Like if you drop a screw or something, don't want to leave a short somewhere so that you end up not being able to start the machine or short-circuiting something, and other bad things happen. If the screw doesn't go in, you can always apply a little extra pressure to make sure it's actually getting to where it needs to go. This board I don't mind so much because I feel like it's a pretty durable type of board. I will say that Asus makes a quality product for the most part. I myself have never had any issues with any of the motherboards that I've gotten from them. I've actually been quite pleased with every one of them, and I've been through a lot. The one companies, well actually two companies that I've not been particularly pleased with have been Gigabyte and MSI. I've had problems with nearly every board I've gotten from those guys, so I don't have a whole lot of confidence. It's not to say that, you know, every board they do put out is bad, because I mean it obviously isn't, otherwise they wouldn't still be in business, I wouldn't think, but I mean they are cheaper usually. But typically, like Asus, I have a lot better luck with overclocking with them, and a lot better luck as far as not having any DOA boards, which is good. Okay, so now my motherboard nicely secured. I'm going to pop in the new processor. You're just going to pull this cover off. It says, important, install processor first, then remove and keep the cover. Okay. I don't know how I can install the processor first without taking that cover off, but we'll go with that. So now this is something you need to be really careful with the processor. Make sure the camera's in the right spot here. Okay, I'm just gonna move here and zoom in a little bit what I'm working on. So there we go. So you want to be real careful and make sure you're actually putting the processor in the right direction. Try to show you here in a second once I get this sound ditch open. There we go. Now you'll see on the processor there's a little yellow tab right there on the bottom left corner here. Okay, that's kind of your guide as to where the processor should go. If you were to look at the back side of it, that's where you're going to see a few less pins than on the other sides. So that should be your guide. And also, typically when you put these in, the writing is going to be needing to stay upright. So it'll be, you'll be able to read it by looking at, you know, just like that, you'll be able to read that. So you just put it on there, you don't have to apply any extra pressure to it at all. That's completely necessary to do that. What will happen is that right there will hold it in and make sure it makes good contact. There's really only about one way that this can fit in there anyhow, but you don't want to try to jam it in some other strange way. So that's the main thing. Now, one thing I didn't do, because I didn't really plan ahead too well here, is put that back panel back on for the cooler. Now, I actually kind of did that on purpose for a reason. If you have a good case, you will actually have the ability to... Oh, I heard something rattle. So, you will actually be able to pull off your back side panel, which I guarantee I can do. You son of a bitch. Let me just try to get this off here real quick. Come on. Also, good flathead. Never hurt anybody. Use every mechanical advantage you can get, is what I always say. And there goes my screwdriver bit, but that's cool. So, as I was saying, if you have a nice good case, you'll actually have access to the back of the processor right here. So this is actually great because if you intend to switch out your backplane for your cooler, this is great because you can just pull this off and you don't have to take out your whole motherboard just to do it. So it's another good thing to look for when you're trying to decide on a type of processor or a type of case. So I'm going to try to line this guy up here. There we go. And then I'm just going to kind of hold that in place while I move this back. And sorry if I don't show this. This part's a little bit tricky in terms of trying to get it where I need it, but basically just putting these 4 hex screw type deals in to the socket around the processor, or around the processor socket rather, so that I can attach my water cooler again. Once I get this last one in here, I'll get the camera back into focus and back into where it needs to be. And then we'll apply some heat count or some thermal compound. If I can remember where the hell I put it. Just had to go to Radio Shack and buy some compound because I completely lost my other more quality type of heat compound. So, well, I got this off actually. Yeah, so case has pretty good cable management as well here too, because it's able to you're able to pretty much hide every cable that you got through the back, and even the hard drives are mounted backwards, so that or on the sides, so that you can route all your cables for them directly through the back, which is great. Having a little bit of trouble getting this back on. Gonna pull it off again. Oh. Working up a bit of a sweat here. Always good to get some exercise, I suppose. And there we go. There we go. Maybe not. Damn it! You know, I've never had this much problem putting this friggin' panel on before. And again, I'm usually doing it from the side where they're not on the front, so... there we go. Alright, so slide that back into view and try to get this refocused. Alright, so... there we go, got a processor installed, got our bracket back in for the water cooler, and now I'm actually going to tighten up these 4 hex retainers for the water block itself. Make sure you get those good and tight. Yeah, that feels good. And then, now we're going to put the thermal compound down. This is a pretty important step, and you want to make sure you don't do this excessively. Now, the thing that everybody will tell you, and it's true, is less is more when it comes to thermal compound. If people try to make like a whole layer and try to make like a cake out of the damn process and everything, it's a bad idea. You want just a small little bit of thermal compound. You really, really, really don't need a lot. So, it comes in a tube like this usually, or something similar to that, and you just put really about all that much is all you really need. That might even be a little bit too much, honestly. So that's it though. That's all you need to put on there. Because when you put this guy on there, it's gonna just spread that out even more. So we'll just, for the sake of showing you, I'm gonna put that down, put a little bit of pressure on it, and as you can see, spread out nice and good there. That's all it really needed. Now you can, if you would like, kind of spread it out a little bit to make it more, give yourself a little bit better contact. I don't really think I need any more. Just kind of spreading it out a bit. Having it coat the whole thing is not necessary, because the heat's all going to pretty much meet at one point anyway. So you just need a bit. That's good. That might even be a little bit too much now, but good enough. And you can just kind of put it down, move it around a little bit, and then get it going. And that's pretty much all you got to do for applying your thermal paste. You don't need a whole lot. You don't need to do much with it. Just a little bit. Especially for the case that I'm not going to be, what's it called? I'm not going to be keeping this on here for a whole lot longer. I'm going to be switching this out with a custom water block and a couple other things. So I'll just be putting new thermal compound on at some point anyway. So now I'm just going to put these screws on there. And when you're tightening these up, I mean by hand, just put them down and tighten them up by hand until they stop tightening. You don't put them on like real tight by hand. But when you get to using a screwdriver, which you definitely want to do, you want to tighten them in a star pattern, or kind of like an X. The reason for that is you get a much more. You'll get it tighter and more evenly secured. You won't warp the. You'll have less of a risk of warping your back connector or your back plane for the connector. So just gonna finish that up. All right, so tighten it by hand down as far as it'll go. Then tighten one end, one corner, go across. Tighten the other one, and you can go down or right. Doesn't really matter. And tighten that one, and then across the opposite way, tighten that down, and then back where you started, just make sure it's getting tight, and there you go. That's all you gotta do for getting your pressing that tight. Like I could pick it up by this right now if I wanted to. So that's good. So with that set, now we're going to pretty much set up the front panel connectors, because that's going to be, next thing on the list here. So, break this guy open. Alright. So we have an audio connector. Actually, this is a USB, which is interesting. I don't really see the point in this, but cool. I guess that's for if you have a USB that's... This is for if you have a USB that comes in separate pin connectors, but I don't. Mine actually all come in this type of variety, where they're all automatically put where they need to be. So now you're going to take your front panel wires, and you're going to pretty much line them up to your your pins. Now, generally, you'll put the way the lettering or the label for the wire is going to be on the it's going to be facing out the same direction as the pin. It doesn't, and this is kind of important because there's plus and minus for the different power, your positive and your negative, and they only go on one way, so you have to kind of make sure you're lining that up right. But basically, see how the writing, I don't know if you can see that very well, but the writing is on the outside here, and on the opposite side it's the same way. These ones don't matter so much because they're individual, so you can just put those on, you know, plus or minus exactly how it shows in the connector. But for the rest of them, it does kind of matter. But you're pretty much just going to take these, plug them into your front panel edge connector here, or directly to the pins if that's the only option that you have available to you, depending on your motherboard. Nice thing about this Asus one is that it came came nice and ready to go as far as being the exact same as the other one. So I pretty much just connect everything exactly the same, which is great. Alright, so that being done, I can plug in the edge connector to the motherboard itself. I think I'm off by one. There we go. Yes. Yeah, there we are. So that's good and plugged into where it needs to be. Next thing is your USBs. Pretty much anywhere where you see a USB port, it'll usually be labeled on the motherboard. Like, it's hard to see, but I do have labels on here that say USB. You can plug in your USB connectors to that. One. See if I can find another one. This can be somewhat of a challenge at times due to the just how much of a pain it can be to do some of the wiring at times. For this, like this one for example, is going to be a little bit tricky because I can't really pull out the wire enough. So I'm actually going to move this one. Over. See if I can, nope, that will not reach. Alright, well, just see if I can find another USB connector somewhere. So that's kind of lame. Anyway, there's also a front panel audio connector, so you'll want to hook that up as well. So you just find the spot on your motherboard that will say front panel audio, HD audio header, or something like that. Which is right here. Alright, so there goes that. May also have an extra connector. This is AC97. Not necessary, I don't believe. Yeah. All depends on the standard that your motherboard is using for the audio. So I think. Nope. Oh, wait. I think I do have another USB right here. I think it is. I believe it is. So there we go. I got both my USBs plugged in there. Let's see. I'm gonna rewire this a little bit for the audio connectors. Kind of push it back and push it under some of these other wires. Just kind of hide the wiring and keep it out of the way as much as possible. Plug that audio back in. There we go. And then the joy of plugging in your SATA ports. This, I like to keep similar devices in about the same places. I generally put my hard drives in as far as put them in 1 through 4 or 0 through 3 rather. So just kind of plug those in. It doesn't particularly matter where you plug them in or which port you plug them in, because you can set up which device you're going to boot from through your BIOS, so it shouldn't make any difference really. I just like to keep my CD drives, optical drives, other random drives that are using SATA in the same general area. That way I can have them I have a better idea of what I'm unplugging when I unplug it. Alright, so that's taken care of. Now I'm going to I do need to do a little bit of cable management later on, so when I do the water cooling I'll probably adjust that a little bit, but for now it's not too big of a worry. You want to find a couple places to plug in your case fans. Looks like I've got a spot down here that I can plug one in. Beautiful. Actually going to route this behind some of the other cables again. And plugged in. There it is. Alright. And we're going to plug in our main power to the motherboard. It's either going to be usually a 24-pin connector. Oh, there goes that. Then you'll have your 2 power cables for your processor, which I've managed to lose miraculously. So I'll have to find those 2 in a second. Looks like I've got my nice video card power cables here though. So I still got those handy, which is good news. But I do need to find where the heck I put those. And I think unfortunately that's going to mean that I need to open up that back panel again. Damn it! Okay, so I will get to that in a little bit, and I'll just finish putting in the rest of these, the rest of the parts I need to put in. So another thing I need to do is pull out the memory, because I'm going to use the same memory. I'm actually using some decent 2133 type memory. I've only got 16 gigabytes, which, you know, not a huge amount, but also nothing. It's not like I need a whole lot anyhow. So I mean, I basically have plenty with 16 gigabytes. So heat spreader came right off there, which is unfortunate. So I should try to put that back on. There we go. Alright. And just lining up your RAM and putting it where it needs to be. Older style motherboards used to have it so that both your plugs or both your clips would move. These ones, only one side kind of moves, which I don't really know how I feel about that. It's kind of weird. I'm used to being able to pull both of them off to the side, and then they and it is a lot easier to get the RAM out of the slot. But you know, it's just another thing to get used to, I suppose, with the changing of times. Popping RAM in, no big deal. If you've done any kind of computer bonding up to, or you know, upgrade to this point, you've probably increased your RAM at some point. So not a whole lot to talk about there. Alright, so I've got my RAM in place, got my coolers in place. got just about everything plugged in. Missing the voltage for the power or for the CPU still, but I will plug that back in shortly once I find the damn connector. So I'm going to turn the camera off for a minute and search for that, and I will be right back.